I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. I wish to invite you to support the program through the oracleswithjamestyson.com Patreon link. For as little as $3 per month, you qualify for a free monthly psychic reading, a past life regression, and exclusive access to our filmed interviews. Don't lower your guard. That's just the beginning as we give back. When I have reached 2,222 members, we will be giving away monthly trips to supernatural hotspots and conferences across North America. Don't run. With a limit of 4,500 Patreon supporters, you will want to get your passports ready, as every third month we will include paranormal conferences and tours in Europe and Australia. Visit theoracleswithjamestyson.com and click on the Patreon link. Where are you listening? That's the Patreon button at theoracleswithjamestyson.com. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to another episode of The Oracles with James Tyson. I am James Tyson, and today we have on this wonderful little Karen A Dahlman episode, Karen A Dahlman. She is a director of the Talking Board Historical Society, a channel for spirit guides, and the author of The Spirits of Ouija, 4 Decades of Communication. As a leading Ouija practitioner, she has been using the Ouija board since about 1973 with astounding results. Karen teaches ways to connect with the afterlife, the higher self, and the sentient beings that exist among us within the unseen dimensions. Within her message, Karen shares the positive side of the Ouija board as a tool for exploring the expansive realms of consciousness. She helps others to discover and unlock their greatest selves, including their extrasensory perceptions, and engage these within the world. Karen actually has been featured on Gaia's show Beyond Belief and is a recurring guest on Coast to Coast AM radio, Fade to Black, and the UK's The Unexplained, as well as numerous other alternative media programs around the world, even The Oracles with James Tyson. Karen holds a master's degree from the University of New Mexico in archetypal art therapy, is a licensed psychotherapist, and is experienced in hypnosis and past life regression. Karen A Dahlman, thanks for dropping by. How are you?
Hey, James, I'm doing great. Glad to be here with you again.
I was bouncing around your website and thought it was kind of cool. Creative Visions Publications with Karen A Dahlman. And I haven't seen this for a while, and it's actually very clean. We were discussing this before we came on the air, how clean your website is. I really, really like it. And I love that you've actually got a new book out. So that is kind of cool, too. This is your 3rd book, I guess?
Yeah, I have 3 books out, and I'm actually working on a 4th one right now. It's one of my New Year's intentions. It's a book. I'm not going to say too much what it's about. It's going to be really edgy, and of course, it's going to be exploring all kinds of levels of consciousness. And of course, I'll be talking about the Ouija board.
Yes. Now, is there going to be pictures?
No pictures.
Well, I'm not going to read it. Your first book, The Spirit of Alchemy, Secret Teachings and Sacred Reunion. Is that the first one?
That's my 3rd book.
Your 3rd book. So
Yes.
The first one was The Spirit of Creativity.
Yes.
Embodying Your Soul's Passion. And then The Spirits of Ouija, 4 Decades of Communication, which I've mentioned already. Spirit of Alchemy, Secret Teachings of the Sacred Reunion. What the dickens is that about, other than what it says? The Spirit of Alchemy.
You know, that book is really my heart and soul. I love that book so much. It's a book that I wrote in conjunction, in cahoots, if you want to say it that way, with my spirit guides. They would come to me in the nighttime. They come to me in dreams. They just verbally, I'd hear them telepathically through my head. They'd come to me through the board, and they helped write a lot of that book. In fact, they told me that was going to be my next greatest teacher writing that book. And this book takes a person on a journey into connecting with their higher self, number one, and then learning to connect even further with your spirit guides and connecting ultimately with source wisdom. And the process you do is this alchemical transformation that occurs within ourselves. And I take you through that process of how you can break down what's going on within you that holds you back, the blocks in your life that hold you back from having these incredible connections, like with your higher self or with source. When I say source, I'm talking about source, God, all that is. I use those words interchangeably, but it's ultimately connecting back with your divine self and how to do that. And the alchemists, a lot of people understood them to be the ones that would transform metals into gold. Well, they wrote, and they did so much more than that. They wrote in ways that were very allegorical, as well as telling a story of how to raise yourself into your soul self. And this book helps you do just that, to begin to align with your soul, be able to receive those messages so you can move through life in a often an easier, sweeter way, or at least when things happen in life, you find a way to deal with it a lot better when you can connect with these aspects of yourself that do exist beyond your corporeal existence. So that book takes you on a journey of how to do that.
Does it involve a lot of meditation or self-reflection?
It involves probably more, I would say, self-reflection than meditation. However, meditation is an aspect that I do talk about in this book and teach. I think that's one of the most important things that anybody can do when you want to open yourself up to these other dimensions, is start with meditating and slowing down, shutting down the words, the chitter chatter in your head, and learning to receive other kinds of messages, or just learn to be. And when you learn to just be without all this chatter, that's when the other dimensions start appearing and showing up, whether it's telepathically or you begin to see them. You begin to slow down to move in those spaces. But self-reflection is super important. In fact, I always encourage people to keep some type of journal where they are having these conversations with themselves. And in that book, I do talk about how to do that, in what ways you can do that kind of dialogue.
Now, when you say kind of opening yourself up to other dimensions, is there anything that we should be worried about? Or is this all kind of only going to come down to us or our greatest good, and all the darker stuff kind of gets pushed out of the side?
Well, this is how I see it. We shouldn't fear spirit or being in a spirit body, because that's where we came, and that's where we will return to. So I don't buy into all the negativity. Yes, I do believe there's negative people in the world. When they die, they might still be negative. There's lower astral beings. There's those levels. But I find that when we work with our greatest self within and learning to uncover that, the book talks about how to discover it and uncover it and to implement it. When you do that, you become your own personal protection. You are centered in that protection. You don't need these extra augmentation. You become that yourself. And so this book really takes a look at yourself to get you to do that. And therefore, when you start working with the other dimensions, it's like you are one of these other dimensions. We exist as multidimensional beings. We exist in many dimensions at one time, and you begin to manage and understand that better and have experiences with that. Time travel's possible, going into your future, having sudden recall of these different lives or parallel lives, or communicating with beings that are living in a different dimension, but just a timeline over from us, and you're learning how to connect with them because they're here to connect with us. And these are all positive things, because I go about it, and what I teach in the book is how to get yourself centered and into this positive space within yourself first, before you start going down these paths. And then therefore, when you do go down them, you tend to attract what it is you are yourself.
It's about intent.
It really is.
You and I had an interview a few years back where you were talking about the Ouija board and the intent. As long as your intent is pure, then you're not going to have to worry about anything dark coming in. And I was thinking about it, thinking, well, this is making perfect sense. This is kind of like Reiki. As long as the intent is there, no matter what you do, it's going to be good. And I was thinking to myself, I think maybe I'll give this Ouija board thing a try. And I don't know if you remember what had happened is I got grabbed by my collar and pulled back in my chair about 6 inches, scared the heck out of me. And I turned around thinking it was my daughter, and there was nobody there. And I found out from a psychic later that it was actually my dad's spirit came through and said, no, you're not. Because he was basically telling me, you may think your intention is pure, but you're not there yet. So he was telling me, no, not time for you to dip into the Ouija board yet. There's too much other stuff going on in your head that would make it a little awkward, let's say, to reach out. So,
Yeah,
and there was
that's
a number
interesting.
of things that were coming. There was a number of things around me that would love to have stepped in. And
Hmm.
now I understand a lot more of what those things were. And in fact, it was one of the reasons I had to move a little quicker out of the last house into the new house. I had a bunch of elemental beings that wanted to kind of take over when I was open. But that the whole thing is I have a problem opening and closing myself, if that makes any sense. And that's why they kept it away. And that same interview, I had a orb the size of a golf ball, a blue one, past me right in between my microphone and the computer screen, just waved. That was the greatest interview I had. It was like
Wow.
my dad pulled me, and then I saw an orb, and it was all my Karen Dahlman interview. It was like, this is
All
cool.
kinds of magic happening over there. Yeah, you bring up a good point. Intentions is the key. It's always the key. And intentions is a key also to just living life. When we have better intentions for ourselves going about our day, we tend to attract that kind of energy to us. Doesn't mean your life gets easy where things don't, bad things don't happen. They do happen. That's part of the human experience. But we find ways to manage it better and to navigate it. So intention is important, not just with the board, but with everything we do. Yeah, and that book we were just talking about, the Spirit of Alchemy, it really worked with learning to reframe the way you view life, reframe the way you see yourself, and to become empowered while doing that. And that's the key. When you do any of this work, there is an aspect of finding your personal empowerment, and I think that's key. Personal empowerment meaning you feel strong within yourself. You understand your energies. You understand, how to open, how to close your own energies. You understand how you're thinking about things. You understand more about your perceptions, your filters, how you view the world, and how that creates what we end up experiencing. And when you start understanding those things, it becomes a lot easier, if you will. It becomes an easier process to be able to work in these other dimensions.
Yeah.
Because you've allowed yourself to match it. You match this energy with your own energy, and through your intentions is where it starts.
All about intentions.
It really, really is. And I know that might sound nebulous to some people, and it just, it's a catchphrase everybody's using. But I got to tell you, I've been using intentions since 73 when I started using the board, and not knowing that's what I was doing until about 86. I realized what it was I was doing and why I always had great results. I went into the whole experiences expecting that from the get-go, which my expectations create my intentions too. So, and I also didn't have, the internet or social media around at that time, and I didn't have people telling me negative things. So to me, it was just the Ouija board was just a tool, just a permission slip now is what I call it. But it was a tool for me to have these conversations that were always positive and just loving and insightful. And I learned a lot about the other dimensions with some of the beings that I met through this tool. And now it's at a point where I still use the board, and I do enjoy using the board, but I do a lot of this work without it. In the book, The Spirit of Alchemy, a lot of that work was done outside of the board. And that's why, I really try to teach people to do this work even without a tool, without a board. Let yourself become your walking, talking tool. That's what you become, the Ouija board yourself, if you will.
So you went through your years of using a Ouija board. And I always look at a Ouija board too as something, the ghost hunting television shows with a little thing that makes a lot of noise and you're trying to talk to a spirit.
Yeah.
Same thing, just a lot quieter. And
right.
And you get a vast variety of beings as opposed to just a dead one that's hanging out in a basement. You get a lot more, and you're probably, in your case, you probably be getting only the nice ones. You're not going to get the grumpy jerk ones. Your second book, The Spirit of Ouija, 4 Decades of Communication, that's obviously a kind of going back over your last 40 years of, oh my God, let's call it 4 decades. This doesn't sound like
I know 40 years sounds so weird. Now I'm in my 46th year of using the board.
over 4.5 decades of using the board. You probably worn a hole in a number of your boards there. So you call it a tell-all book. Oh, and by the way, if anyone who wants to look for these books, if you go to creativevisionspublications.com, that's Karen's website. Please, if you want these books, buy them from there. Because if you go through Amazon, Karen gets a nice little note from Amazon saying you owe us $5 for the book we sold. No, you don't. But
No, I don't.
at least Karen gets some money for these ones. Amazon doesn't take 90%. Yeah, so drop by our website. There's a lot of stuff on there anyway. But this book, it kind of goes over all this, how you started and what developed over those 40 years. Take me back to the first time, if you can remember, actually using one of these.
Oh, I do remember, and that would be 46 years ago this summer. So I was at my friend's house. I had a little friend I used to play with. She was 8 years old, and as I was, and then she had an older sister who was 10. And they just brought me over to the house. We always played games, and we sat down in their room, and they said, "We want to show you this game we have." And they pulled out the Ouija board in a box. I was like, "What is that? I really don't understand this. I kind of heard about it, but it just seems stupid." That was my response to it. And here I am 46 years later. I just thought this is silly. And I go, "What do you put your fingers on that indicator and push it around? I mean, that's dumb." They said, No, you don't. They said spirits and ghosts will push it around. I said, "Oh yeah, please. That's not real." And they said, "No, it is." And they started doing it. And I thought, "Oh, they're pushing it." And then they swore they weren't. And then I said, "Why don't you try it now?" So I put my fingers on the planchette, the indicator, and it started moving. And then one of them joined in with me, and we just had all these conversations going on. It was kind of silly stuff that little girls would ask. And then finally they said, we want to show you somebody else that we speak with. And I said, "Oh, well, who would that be?" And they said, "Well, watch." And so they started getting messages spelling out, and they said, "This is our sister." I said, "What? You have a sister that's dead?" And they said, "Yeah, you didn't know?" And I go, "No, you guys never told me." And it turned out the girl who was older, she had a sister that was her twin that died shortly after birth. And I thought it was pretty crazy. We're talking to this little girl, but the strangest part of that story was, if that wasn't strange enough, was that the little girl that had died was now also a 10-year-old, just on the other side. That blew my mind that I had to run home and tell my parents. And I said, "Oh my God, it's real. The Ouija board works." And they're like, "Sure," wink, wink. I said, "Well, I know you don't believe me, but Santa Claus will believe me. And I'm going to get one for Christmas this year from Santa Claus." And that's all I wanted for Christmas. And so 6 months later, there it was. Santa Claus delivered and brought me my first Ouija board. But yeah, I remember those days. I remember that experience. It was so transforming and affirming to me in many ways. I had already believed in the afterlife. I'd already been seeing things, having visitations that I couldn't explain from a very, very young age. And this is my way to start beginning to explain it. And so it was always positive to me. If you could speak to a little girl who's growing up on the other side, and she's happy and it just feels love. And I thought, how much better can it get than that? And so I just kept exploring and met so many different spirit beings along the way. Some became guides. And then, that book covers everything from that very first story through all the different situations I encountered and beings and places I went and hauntings and all kinds of things. But yeah, I remember it all. And the other thing I do, James, is I keep copious notes. And some of the stories I told were from journals. And then by 86, I was keeping every single session I wrote. I would write it down on a piece of paper and all the messages that came through. And I make notes in the column of the pages, like what question I asked. And I did that for years until it's been about 6 years, I think now, that I finally got a digital recorder. So I now record the sessions, both what's being written down, I speak it back, as well as the questions I asked. And all that information, I keep these notes, I keep them all. They go into my future books and into my work. So I do have everything journaled, chronicled, that I'm doing when I do this work.
Well, welcome to the 21st century and getting a digital recorder.
Was that awesome?
Yeah. It's like, you should have told me I would have got one for your birthday.
Thanks.
We're talking to Karen A Dahlman. She is the queen of the Ouija board, or not. She's a wonderful person. And if you'd like to see a little bit more about her, please visit her website, Creative Visions Publications with Karen A Dahlman. Karen, you were saying just now that around the time and even before you were playing with this Ouija board with your neighbor, you had visitations. Tell me, what was visiting you?
Well, I found out a lot later what I'll tell you what started it, and he came up again when I wrote the book, The Spirit of Alchemy. I thought I put him away forever. Oh, I was 2 years old, and I had memories going back to when I was 2, and in the crib, and there was this being that used to come visit me, and he looked kind of like what I would say looked like an elemental or an elf or something, and I can still see him to this day. And he would shift sizes, like he could be a few inches to 3 feet, mostly around the size I was, and maybe a little bit bigger sometimes. It just depended what I was doing. But he would come and talk to me, and we would talk about all kinds of just things. We'd play. It was mostly playing and just doing play talk, and he would say things to me sometimes. But my mom would come in my room and say, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "Oh, Dacky." His name was Dacky. And she says, "There's nobody here, Karen." I said, "There is." And this went on until about the age of 5. And she just said, really, you shouldn't be doing that when you go to school. And it's just probably not gonna go over well. And so I thought, God, what am I doing? I got to shut this down. I couldn't quite explain why I had this and nobody else could see him. I do understand now as I got older and learned about it and learned just so much more about him. But anyway, I put him away. I thought I did. I shut him out. And when I shut him out at the age of 5 and a half, he didn't come anymore, but then other beings started appearing. And I had some incredible, people would call them angels. I wouldn't call them angels. I call them guardians. And they were large beings that filled my doorway. And a lot of these beings would come at night. Dacky would come during the day. Dacky would come at any time when I wanted him. I call him, boom, he would be there. But these large beings would come periodically. And they seemed to come around auspicious times, such as Christmas, Easter, or near those times. And so in my mind, I would say, oh, that's Santa Claus, or that's the Tooth Fairy, or that's the Easter Bunny. But they didn't look like that at all. They were just large beings, a huge light that filled my doorway, and I could see an outline, and they would communicate. And it felt like it was in my head, so it felt telepathic, but they're definitely solid beings, because one time one of them walked over to me in my bed, and this was actually on Christmas Eve. And I could see him, and I go, "Oh God, it's Santa. If I'm not asleep, he's going to, not bring his gifts. I'm not. I need to be asleep." This time I was 7 years old, and I quickly fake sleep. You close your eyes, you try not to make them move and blink, and they were kind of doing that. I go, "Okay, don't hold your breath, breathe normally." He comes over and places his hand and touches my face, and it felt just like just a touch, like he was trying to see if I was asleep or something. And I felt it, and he walked and moved back. And I opened my eyes and I could see them at the doorway and then leave. And that was one of the times I was touched physically by them, but it was a lovely touch. But every time they showed up, I felt pure joy and love. And I couldn't explain why. They just felt so good. Well, when I was writing that third book, which again, my guides had told me, this is going to be a great teacher for you, Dacky showed up. I was out walking, and a lot of times I would walk and talk, and it's a process I do. It's a walking meditation, and I walk and talk, and I might bring my little dictaphone with me, which is my digital recorder, and I'd talk into it. And all of a sudden, this poem started flowing out of me, and it came in just quickly. And I'm so glad I had my recorder with me, and I just talked it out. I was walking, it went back, transcribed it, and it was this poem, and I won't give it away, but it's in my book, and it came from Dacky. And this whole story of when I was younger, that when he would visit me, and some of the stuff, and that's in my book too. But then I started finding out about the guardians, and they are truly another interdimensional being. They do exist in another dimension, and they are what some people might call angels. But these will come and help look out over you, especially when children are very open. I was very open to the other realms, that they want to make sure everything's okay, that you're not taking too much in. And I think that's one of the places where I really, that's why I call them the guardians, where I was guarded and I was helped. And I started learning information from them on how to do this work that I do and that I teach and talk about. So, but I had other beings come through. I've seen many things that just are unexplainable, and I don't have fear of those things. They weren't as scary thing to me at all. Although I had nobody to talk to about it with. My parents thought I was just making stuff up when I'd tell these beings were in my room, and I wasn't making things up. It was very, very real. The only thing that came through that was scary to me and I'll share this, and I don't talk about this very much yet, but I'm starting to talk about it, and it will be in my fourth book I'm writing because I think it's really important.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have encounters with extraterrestrials, and I am one of those people who used to have encounters with lights and then also the little beings. And this was back in the mid 70s as well. And this is even before I was doing the Ouija board, and then when I was using the board, it's like they didn't come through. I was like, these guys scared me. They come in with their large eyes and stare at me, and I'd be trying to escape, and I'd go into a paralysis. And I didn't know much about any of this extraterrestrial thing back then in the 70s. I mean, we were starting to talk about it. Whitley Strieber's book came out shortly later. I think it was late 70s, early 80s. I can't remember exactly what day, but when his book came out, I saw the cover of it and I went, oh my God, that's them. And I finally made the connection. I didn't know they were extraterrestrial back then. I didn't know what they were. I just saw the lights in the sky, and I thought maybe they are related to the UFOs. I don't know what they are, but they would scare me because I couldn't understand them, and I would go into paralysis. But then I saw what they were, and they were the little grays. So I had my encounters with them, and that didn't just stop as a child. I've had them throughout my life. And where it is now with me is like, I don't have that fear. I didn't understand. When you're a child and these things happen to you, a lot of times it becomes placed into a fearful space within your mind or within yourself because you don't understand. And also because it seems scary, where the other beings would come, and it was a gentleness about them, where these beings would come and stare at me, and it was just one of those things that I couldn't quite understand. And I do now. I don't have the fear I had about them then, but I did. Those are the beings that scared me.
Yeah, that's interesting. You've got a guide, like this Daki fellow.
Daki.
You say that you kind of know more about who he is now.
Yes.
Who is he? Was he a protector before your angelic protectors came in?
Yes, he was, and he still is. And he says, he tells me, he says, I really like to stay on the outskirts, stay out on the peripherals where the other guys work with you. But he was one of the first that came into the world with me, to be with me as a child, because I was very open to these things. And he's still around, but he's not an elemental that he looks like one. He's more of like an interdimensional being, like a one of these guardian type beings, but he's a different type of guardian. But he does look like a little elf, although he just dressed that way because that's how I accepted him. And it made more sense to me as a child that, I did like little elves and things of that nature. I was fascinated with that. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was, because of him, because he was so small. But he's still around. He's still the little guy, but he popped up in that book. And then when he did his poem and helped me remember the whole story of him, and then he pops up again at the end of the book, and I won't explain what happens. It explains in the book more of who he is. And it's just crazy cool. I didn't make the connection until it was time to write that book. So we're talking, 50 years later.
Wow.
Basically 50 years later, I finally figured out who he was. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. Now I want to buy the book. Stop that.
We have these relationships with beings, whether we are aware of it or not, and they might be in our dreams or when we're in our other dimensions of ourself. They're there, and there's many loving ones, more so than there are that are fearful or scary or mean. There are those as well, but there are such loving beings, and he's one of them. And they're gosh, some of them don't even look like what we expect them to look like. Some of them don't even look humanoid. But yet they're still there to help us. And this kind of gets us into the whole arena of cryptids, cryptozoology and cryptids and interdimensional beings, and how some of them, we were talking earlier about Sasquatch. They don't necessarily look human, and Sasquatch kind of has a humanist quality about him. But like Dogman, for example, or mermaids or gargoyles or these chupacabras. I mean, they all exist somewhere in some timeline in another dimension, and they just happen to bleed through. But there are these other beings, and a lot of them will be with us throughout our life, and we'll experience them here and there.
Yeah, they'll pop in and they pop out when they're supposed to.
That's right.
The First Nations here in Canada, the Aboriginal population here, would say that if you saw a Sasquatch, it was gifted.
Oh.
It was a gift to you to be able to see him.
I would think so.
It's not random. Other than the ones that chased my friend Thomas Seawood out of his cabin,
my gosh,
throwing rocks at him.
Oh.
Because I guess they were just territorial and didn't really want him coming and building some shacks for a sea kayaking camp where they've been left alone for 100 or so years. So I think they get along a little bit better now. But at the time, it was like, no, we're good with people. We don't want you here. So they were chasing them out.
Wow.
In your case, have you ever seen what would be the common cryptid? You were saying as far as intergalactic or an alien being, the ones with the big eyes, but have you ever seen something like Dogman or Bigfoot or
I have
a
no,
Sasquatch?
I have not seen those physical, the ones that people say show up physically. I've not seen them at all. I would love to see Sasquatch. I'm not so sure about Dogman. He kind of creeps me out a little bit. But I did interview a gentleman who's had experiences with both Dogman and Sasquatch, and he had actually positive experiences with Dogman, where I know there's also very scary things that happen. But no, I have not. I've not seen those. I would love to. I would just absolutely love to. But then again, we mentioned earlier, it's when it's supposed to happen, the timing of it, and even with Dacky, I don't see Dacky anymore, and maybe I'll see him in another 20 years. I don't know. It's like you don't always see these beings when you're supposed to. Now, I'll tell you what I've developed and what happens when you start going down these rabbit holes, or if you start working with your gifts or your abilities. And is when I started using the Ouija board, I noticed that I started developing even more so with some of my gifts. And I believe we all have the abilities to reach into these other dimensions and have positive experiences. What I noticed as a byproduct of using this tool after many, many years is that it's become even that much more pronounced for me. Yeah, I came into the world already doing these things, but now it's at a point where I can do them more readily, not necessarily go, okay, Dacky, come through, but I have other beings that'll come through because I've developed this and I can do this outside the board. And so I have a regular dialogue daily with the ones I call the guides. I've never seen them. They are of source energy, so they're an energetic form of a light being. We wouldn't be able to see them with our eyes. It's a whole different frequency, but they communicate. They communicate telepathically. They communicate through the board. They come in dreams, but I've never been able to see them, and I probably never will. Maybe when I go back to spirit, maybe that would be the time. But they have a great sense of humor, and they share all kinds of information, and they're the ones that have inspired me. Probably the most. Dacky inspired me in the beginning, but they're the ones since they came in '94, and they've inspired me to do the work I do in the public, to write my books, and to share their profound messages that are so insightful and helpful for people that I'm more on that level. Although I can't see them, I'm still reaping the benefits of our communications we have. So, even if you don't see Sasquatch, I hear people have received telepathic messages and stuff from that type of being, regardless of being able to see them. And a lot of the extraterrestrials too, they'll come through and they may not present themselves, but you may receive downloads of information from them as the races that are trying to help humanity.
Do you find that lately they've been trying to help us a little more?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Since about, well, I'm gonna throw this out, about 2012.
Oh, I knew you were gonna say that. Yeah, right. And that's what everybody's saying too. What happened right before that, the Mayan calendar 2012 thing, December 22nd? That summer we had Venus transiting the sun. That was a really huge mile marker also in the Mayan culture. It's a rare phenomenon. It was a powerful time, and I think that's, if you back it up about 6 months, it was that June, 6-7 months. That to me was when it really started. But I'm with you, the 2012. People have been opening up their abilities, and we could go back to the harmonic convergence, which started in 1987. That was when everybody came together to really open up, and the energies were perfect at that time to receive downloads, and people started channeling. All kinds of things started happening around that time, and it gradually grew. But I think for most people, this 2012 time was when it really opened. And the guides have talked to me about some of these energies as well. What's happening is we're seeing it. You just look around your culture and the world, you're seeing all these shows on television about ghosts, the ghost hunters and things of that nature. You're seeing a lot more emphasis on learning about cryptids. You're also seeing a lot of people, yourself and myself, sharing our podcast or shows on YouTube. There's so much more of this, and I like it. I like that we're being saturated with it, because what it tells me is that we are beginning to be able to open and see and feel and use your clairsenses and recognize that there's other existences beyond what our eyes and our physical apparatus can see or experience, and that there's so much more. And people are having all kinds of downloads of information. There's great books out there. There's a lot of channelers are doing stuff, but really, I think we all are always channeling. We're always channeling some kind of inspiration that helps us move forward in life. And that could come from our higher self. It can come from ourself in another dimension. It can come from source itself or from the guides. But yes, people are doing this more and more. They're realizing that there's so much more to themselves than this bag of bones or corporeal existence, that they do have existences while they're in this physical form that extend beyond their physical body. And I cheer it. I applaud everybody for being willing to come out and do this and talk about it and share. And I know there's a lot of people that still don't believe it and think you're crazy and all this stuff. And so you learn, we were talking about this earlier, James, you learn who you can talk about this stuff with and explore it with. And you do want a safe environment for you to do that, so you can really begin to understand yourself more. And I would have to say this, when you do open to this stuff and start exploring it, maybe you're excited about UFOs or something, and you start, get your night vision goggles, start looking for lights in the sky. It just tells you that the world is not quite what we've been told, and there's so much more that exists. And maybe our history and maybe what we think about who we are is not really what it is. And so it makes you start exploring yourself and humanity. And I think that there's nothing better than being, again, here's that word, self-reflective, to ourselves as humankind.
Karen A Dahlman, that is fascinating. Going back to that 2012, that's late November 2012 is when somebody told me I was something called an empath, and that I could read oracle cards, and those things that I'd seen all my life were really ghosts. And from there, my life did a 180, and I'm off on another path.
Well, would you say it did a 180 too? Because then you devoted time to all this, didn't you? You took the time to. Yeah, I think that's what people need to understand. It takes time. It's not, some people do just all of a sudden have an experience. I'm that person that had that experience as a child. I didn't practice anything to make that happen, but I do practice everything else I do, and you, I know you do too, James. And the more you do it, it's like it's like you widen that experience of your senses, and now you go, all of a sudden you go, wow, I am empathic, I am to it, I have psychic abilities, I am mediumistic. All these things start becoming the truth, if that's what you want, because you put your emphasis there, and then you allow the possibilities, and they just grow.
I keep getting told too that like in 2020, everything is going to get switched on for me.
Ooh.
It's going to be something that I could never have handled a couple of years ago, when I had a psychic said, no, you were supposed to get switched on like in 2017 in December, but you weren't ready. So, and I could imagine that, because after talking to a number of people who are seers and actually see things, I probably would have pooped myself. So now I know that by 2020 I should be okay. But in 2020, there is, even Nancy Reagan claimed that Armageddon was going to happen in 2020. And now I know Nancy Reagan's psychic.
Yeah, right.
Our friend Marianne Morgan was Nancy's psychic. I'm going to have to phone Marianne Morgan here probably later today and find out, now that I've remembered that. Okay, oh my God, I'm supposed to have everything's supposed to be turned on in 2020. Is that because I'm dead? Like,
oh goodness. Oh
no. Hey, and she's spooky enough. She'll tell you when you're going to die and the cause and the time, and be careful about those conversations with Marianne Morgan. But
yeah, that's spooky.
Yeah, it is. You say no, and then
I don't want to know that personally.
No, you don't.
Because you know what? Then takes away the what life is. If you knew you're going to die next year, do you think you're going to go down the path of the trajectory you are? No, you're probably going to go live it up, and it's just things change. And I think it's not good to know that.
Card there was.
Yeah, right. Why would so I don't know. I think it's the guys always say the water has to be murky. This is the analogy they gave. The water has to be murky, and they say the reason for that is if everything was clear to you, then what would be the purpose of even having your existence that you're having right now? And how you grow is through the murkiness, finding your way through it, and then you'll find that makes your life that much sweeter, because you've accomplished, you've grown, you've learned to see in the dark, and that's really what's important here. And so to know that the death time, I don't ascribe to that. I don't ascribe to that.
No, it's creepy enough to live this life, let alone to know where the exit is, and walking towards it. What do you do the last week? Oh, you're going to get hit by a tree. Well, I'm going to stay indoors.
Right. You would start avoiding things, become paranoid. That's true too. Don't get in that car, But sometimes people do get prophetic visions. I haven't received anything like that, but they know not to get in that car or get on an airplane.
Yeah.
And for me, what the guide said to me, he said, yeah, you as everybody have escaped things of that nature. But what happens is, Your car might have had a flat tire that morning, so it set you back 2 hours. They say things like that happen all the time, and you have beings that are interacting and helping you down this path, and so they might make it where your tire's flat. So we have so many interactions from these other dimensions that, for me, once I realized that, I mean, I was experiencing it when I came in the world. I realized I'm going to purposely make these interactions happen, and that's why when the board came into my life, it became a natural tool for me to do that, and it allowed me to have interactions with all these different types of beings. And I don't just do the deceased. I think the transitioned are fine. I don't mind talking to them, but I've gone so far beyond that into other levels of consciousness with other sentience characters.
Like who?
Well, I'll tell you, some of the sentient beings that I think are the wisest are the trees. So I talk to the trees, and they do come through my board, and they also talk to me telepathically as well. And it's not in so much words, it's more in feelings and sensations. But when they do come through the board, everything comes through in words, because that's how we spell. And it always requires a helper to help them out, to put it into English so I can understand it. It's that kind of thing. But trees are like Native Americans. They're what you guys call First Nation. They're so proud. Their ancestry goes way back, as you think of the seed to the seed to the seed of a tree that keeps growing, and especially ones that are not even transplanted. But even if they are transplanted, their roots go into the ground. It's like a network. It's like their World Wide Web for them, and they can read everything that's going on with Gaia, with Earth, just by their roots being down there. Whether it's a ball of roots, whether it's reaching roots, it doesn't matter. That's their nerves. That's how they feel. That's like the part of their brain. And this is how they communicate to their saplings and young. And this is how they communicate to other standing tall beings, which are the trees or the vegetation. Now, there's this book, The Secret Life of Trees, and it's interesting. I started talking to trees several years back. I've always felt trees, but I really literally started talking to them on the board, although I've always felt trees and had just a love towards them, as most people do. And I realized it was so much more than that. But I found this book. Somebody brought it to my attention after I talked on one of my shows about talking to trees and the messages they had, and how they just love humanity, and they love the people, like the ones that are in my yard. They appreciate me because I love them and I take care of them, and they like to see me out there just enjoying the outdoors near them, or going up and touching them. They love all that, and they want me to take their memory and message with them wherever I go, and remember them, and they'll never forget me. That kind of thing. They're just so loving and wonderful. But this guy is a scientist and wrote this book, The Secret Life of Trees, and in it he talked about this neural pathway of the roots and how they actually communicate to each other through this, and then communicate to their saplings. The same things these trees are telling me verbatim. And this guy has done research on this, and it can prove it. He's done certain measurements and things. He talks about how trees communicate with animals by sending off smells, so some trees will send off smells so the animals won't eat their bark, or just all these different ways they communicate. And then this is exactly what they were telling me on the board. It was just crazy. But yeah, there's all kinds of anything that has a sentience to it, you can communicate with it. Now, getting it to communicate with you and wanting to is another story. But for example, we talked about the rattlesnake in my backyard, and this was a few years back, and he came through. And I live by the ocean, you guys, and it's there's some green belts nearby, but these are houses. If you see California, they're stacked on top of each other. Basically, there's not a whole lot of property, and so I'm like, where does this thing live? But he comes slithering into my back patio. And I was just amazed at it. I immediately go outside, and I knew if it wasn't coiled up, it couldn't strike. It can only strike as long as its body and all this stuff. And I just stayed at a distance and took some pictures, filmed it. And then he went to go have a drink at this little water fall in my backyard. And then he coiled up, and I thought, that's it. He doesn't want me here anymore. So I went inside, let him do his thing, and then he stayed for a while and then left and went back. And so I decided to talk with him, and he did want to talk. And what he told me was that he was 8 years old, and that he lived beneath my home. There's this small green belt. He lived in that area, lived under the bushes. It's a great place for snakes to live. And he said that this is basically his local watering hole. He didn't call it that. He says, I like to drink the water here. I come here often. Please, is what he's saying. He says, please know that if you get too close, I will strike. That is what I do. I mean no harm, and I just want to have the water. And thank you for letting me do this. And then off I will go again. There'll be no problem. And so I was like, okay, I used to go out barefoot all the time. I started wearing my Uggs. I started putting my boots on and going outside just in case there was other snakes. And I have seen other snakes, but that's the only time I saw the rattlesnake. But he says he's here, and he often comes and has a drink there. And so it has a sentience about it. It was okay with communicating with me. I respected its space, left it alone. People are like, why didn't you call the game and wildlife to get him, take it out and kill it? I was like, I'm not going to kill it. It's just doing its thing that it does. And, as long as I'm smart, and my cats don't go outdoors, and as long as I'm smart about it and respectful, that's what these animals always say. Just respect me and give me my space.
Everything's got that energy, and anything with energy, I think, really has a way to communicate, whether they communicate with the same species only, or they can communicate out.
Exactly.
The secret life, or what was it? The Secret Life of Trees?
Trees, I think. Let me look this up.
So that's Peter Wohlleben. He worked for the Forestry Commission in Germany. He's got a number of books out.
That's
the Hidden Life of Trees,
Hidden
the Inner Life of. Well,
Yeah.
there's two: The Secret Network of Nature, or The Hidden Life of Trees, and The Inner Life of Animals. There are a number of books that he's put out. Imagine spending over 20 years in the trees and in the bush in Germany, in the Black Forest, let's say.
That's exactly where he was.
Which is an amazing energy in itself, like with elementals bouncing around, and a pure old European forest, one of the last little tiny bits left, and that energy that comes out. And he was obviously affected by it, but. Yeah, he's an amazing guy. I've now seen you're making me buy all these books. You're making me buy yours and Peter's books now. His
book is fantastic, and I really enjoyed reading it after all of this information I was receiving from the trees, and I thought, well, there's got to be something to this. And so I just started reading his book, and he's like showing it with research, and he has other scientists that have also talked about how they communicate, and they communicate to the animals, communicate to each other, they communicate to other kinds, and they have a whole hierarchy. They have families and everything. And I always thought, well, God, do these trees hate it when they get transplanted and moved to another location? Or they don't. I have this plumeria tree, and she's the sweetest thing. When she talks, she says, she likes to talk almost like poem, like a poet. She's like, I come from a land far away that's tropical. And she goes on this whole story, and she's like, but I love it here because you appreciate, and there's other beautiful trees here too. And we all communicate. It's like, what is going on here? So yeah, if you are open to it, the possibilities are infinite. They're endless or infinite. And sentience is in most everything that's alive. It isn't everything that's alive, but it's also in the earth, and the earth is alive, but it's also in rocks. It's also in crystals. They all can communicate. Now, do they communicate in English? Not necessarily, but what I've learned, if I can get a helper to help me that can work with them to translate it, that's how I do all this work. So how this all started for me, James, was talking to all these different sentient beings. It's all started with a cat. Started with a cat of mine named Hermes, and this was in 1994, I believe. It was in February of 1994. This is either 94 or 92, somewhere in that time range. I was using the board with a partner, and my cat, very much alive, was sitting in a chair, a rocking chair. He used to always sit in this chair and just watch us to the board. I don't know what it was. He loved to be around it. And all of a sudden, I was talking to my angel. That's what we were talking to my angel. We were just having a great conversation. And she said, okay, you're not going to believe this, Karen, but somebody wants to talk to you. And I thought, okay, cool. There's a lot of spirits that always want to talk to me. She was like, no, this is something different. I said, okay. Trusting my angel. She goes, okay, I'm going to bring him in. And then the planchette kind of changes direction. It moves a little differently, a little slower. And it spells out, Hermes cat, I love you. Now, my cat's name is Hermes. He was not a dead cat. He was alive, sitting right there. And I said, are you kidding me, Mary Angel? My cat, she goes, yes. He wanted to say hello. He wanted you to know that he can also talk to you through this tool. I said, well, how is that possible? Then she explained it to me. She said, well, I'm working with him right now. I'm helping translate what it is he wants to communicate to you. And we take what images, the words, the thoughts, whatever they give us, because it's not English, obviously, and we take that and translate it in the best we can to English so you can hear it. So basically, it's a rough translation of what he's saying. He wanted you to know that he loves you and that it was him, his name. 'Cause I had another cat in the house that wasn't talking to me at that time. So that cat started me off on this, and I started that animal communication back then, and I've been doing it ever since. And then I just started pushing boundaries of the communications. And I thought, well, if I can speak to my cats, I can speak to dogs and horses. And I did all the domestic animals. And then I talked to people's pets all the time. And then you could talk to transition pets. The same process works. And then I started talking to the wild animals. Dolphins and buffalo and you name it, we talked to it. And then I started talking to the cryptids, the interdimensionals. I know that gets weird, but they also have a way to telepathically communicate. And they also have these other energies and beings that can help them, assist them with that. So the list goes on. And it just, it's mind blowing. It's amazing. And some of the things that we learn from these different beings is just incredible. It really blows my mind at how much many of these beings just love humanity and are really here to help us wake up. Because a lot of these animals are already awoken. For example, your domestic pets, and we can go beyond domesticated pets, but the ones you know the best, like your cats, your dogs, maybe your horses, your guinea pigs, your parrots, whatever you have at home, they come into our life. We think we choose them. We think we rescue them from these terrible places or from the pound or wherever you get your animals. They disagree. They believe that they came to teach us. They believe that they are our healers, and they believe that they came to rescue us. And they often say, what the animals will say is that it was their time to go when they go, and they're only here for a short time. They have a different lifespan than us, but that's all they need. And that they really are here to serve humanity and want us to wake up and to, be more aware of how we're treating the environment, how we're treating each other, how we're not ready for a lot of these beings to make themselves available to us, and to communicate with us, because we're just going to freaking kill them, shoot them. Like Bigfoot, everybody wants to go hunt Bigfoot, Sasquatch, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Instead of figuring out another way to do this communication. So the animals are really in our life, especially domesticated ones, have chosen to be with us to help us. And they do have a lot to say to us. And whether or not you use a board to talk to them, you have a relationship with your animals, that you understand them. And that can develop even more where you start receiving telepathic messages.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the things I need to really focus a little bit more on. I get when standing with another human being, looking at them, I can sense the relatives standing beside them and the angels on their left side, and get stuff through. And I know from reading cards, I've had people's pets come through, to pets that have passed, to tell them about their present pet, and they may be sick or they may have anxiety, and I pass that information on to the owner. Mm-hmm. And someone said, "Oh, you're an animal communicator," and I said, "No, I'm not." "Oh, I guess I am." Yeah, but it's like, and one of the things I like, especially the way you've actually developed, Karen, is you and I have one thing in common, or a number of things in common. One of the things is we just walk around with all these questions.
Yes.
And every time we talk to somebody, we have more questions about it. And you've started the Creative Visions TV with Karen A Dahlman. It's on YouTube, where you go out and you interview people, and you post the interviews on YouTube. So if anybody likes watching interviews of this type of subject on YouTube, go to Creative Visions TV, or even just Google Karen A Dahlman YouTube, and it'll take you there. You've got, you've interviewed a number of really interesting people, not only about the Ouija board or the talking board. You have chat rooms on there and things like that, where you can interact with a lot more people. And it again, those are the types of things that just leave us with more questions to then go out and interview somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you really hit on an important part here. It's having an inquisitive mind, asking these questions and trying to explore. I think some of the most important things that we come into the world with, this is what this is our God-given right. This is our divine right. We come in the world with the ability to explore and discover, to have that drive within every single human is in that, and also a drive to be free. And so I just want to say, don't never give up your freedom to anybody or anything, you guys. Having freedom, the ability to explore and discover is golden, and that will take you into so much more of the world. And not just letting it be spoon-fed to you anymore. Like even what I'm telling you today, go do it yourself. And so, yeah, that's why I started Creative Visions TV, because on YouTube, is because people had a lot of questions about the board. They had a lot of questions about life, how to even connect with the spirit guides or connect with their higher self. And I thought, this is what I've been working on for many years in my life. And I thought, it's time to have a forum where we can do this together. And not only can I help people if they have questions and want to explore the work with the Ouija board, but also bring on all these incredible people who are doing this work in the world, all in their own niche, whether it's working with crystals or stones or working with the angels or working with cryptids, having a connection or seeing them, being an experiencer with aliens or communicating with aliens. I had all kinds of really interesting people on there, and channelers and all that stuff. But I think it's important that we ask questions and never give up on asking questions like, why am I here? What's the meaning of all this? And then when you think you have it answered, it changes again because you learn something else. And so for me, it's like, I just keep going. I don't have the answers and I want to keep going. And then I learn something else and then it awakens me more. And then with each book I write, and everybody I have a conversation with, that touches me and inspires me, and then it takes me into another direction. And just really, it's just like it's like widening. And I love the whole idea of being able to widen my perspective of what this universe is about, because it is vast, and we were just a small little prick pin, a little dot in this galaxy, the Milky Way, and there's so much more out there, and there's so much even more right here in these other dimensions. That's right here, literally 5 inches from your face, breathing. That's a whole nother realm existing. James, do you remember that movie, The Others, with Nicole Kidman in it?
The Others? No, I don't. I'm not familiar with that.
Ooh, well, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but if you haven't seen it, you want to see it. It gets into these other dimensional lives, how they can live exactly the same time in the same space, yet you may not see each other because you're in another dimension. And it begs the question of, who's the one that's really in spirit? Who's the one that they thought it was like dead people in their house? But who is really the dead person? It's a real trippy movie because it makes you ask these questions of, is it possible to live in one dimension and not be able to see another dimension where another being is existing, and they just bleed in and out, like a phasing in and out of your existence, and you phase in and out of theirs sometimes. Maybe that's why we do bump into the cryptids. Maybe that's why sometimes cryptids come into our realm, like the mermaids or the dragoons. I really believe very much in the dragoons, and I believe that they're a being that lives in another dimension. At one time, they lived in our dimension and left because we wanted to kill them. We didn't understand them, and so they left. And you have all these wonderful effigies or statues or memories of them in the UK and Europe and in China. They were really populated and were wonderful creatures, but they had to go underground and leave. So they go into another dimension, and sometimes people still see them. So they phase in and phase out. And that movie really taps into this. And that movie came out a long time ago, like 25 years ago, I think it was. And it touches on this whole idea. So having that mind that wants to explore and understand things is really all you need. And once you have that dedication to doing this, whether it's reading books, watching shows, listening to James' podcast here, checking out the website, reading people's blogs on these topics, or going to events, it just will widen you that much more. And then you'll just start taking more in. And then next thing you know, your ability to have experiences starts to shift and change. And like James was saying, he took the time, focused, and now he feels this big opening for him within a year. And I would have to agree. I've seen James over the years also develop with his tools. And I could see he's come a really long way because he finally, dedicated yourself to it. But it starts with that question. It starts with the mind that goes, what else is there? And that question right there, it's like knocking on the door, and now all you got to do is turn the doorknob and walk through. And that's really what happens.
Yeah. And it's walking through that door and then realizing there are 3 other doors.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's even more beyond those doors.
Yeah. And we just keep, aren't I ever going to learn everything? And I was told once, you don't want to know everything, because as soon as you know everything, there's no use for you being here anymore to expand your life. So they kind of call you home.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you're done. It's like people, I can manifest everything now. I can just ask for stuff. And, really? I wouldn't go outside because you're a meteor is going to fall on you. A plane is going to fall on you. It's time for you to go. There's nothing to learn here. Karen, what I'm going to be doing with my podcast, I was wondering if I can throw this by you, because you're relatively intuitive and you have all sorts of guides and angels around you that can chime in. What I'd like to do is put it on if somebody likes my account, likes these podcasts and they think it's worth $3 a month, I was going to get them to join my Patreon, and where it's limited to 4,500 people. But because I really don't need to live off of this, but I'd like to travel and do video recordings of interviews all around, I was going to start, if I had people in there and I get about 100 people in, I would start drawing once a month for a psychic reading and for one person, and then maybe another person a past life regression. At 2,222 people, I would draw a name once a month for a trip for two, somewhere within a few thousand miles, to, if you liked going to a cryptid conference, or if you like to go to a haunted location, and I would take a trip for two, airfare, hotel, or airfare accommodations and car rental, and I'd probably tag along with them and interview them and things like that. And at the full 4,500, I will bounce around internationally: Australia to the US, US to Australia, Canada to the UK, UK to the US, that kind of thing. What do you think of something like that, to give back to the people who actually do listen and do put in a $3 a month, a kind of a donation to the system?
I think that's a fantastic idea. It's a way to interact even more so with the listeners. They get to meet you too in person, and then to be able to go on these explorations with somebody and to, like I said, explore and discover. That's what it's all about. That's the beauty of life. And I think it's a wonderful way. So everybody, if you do these drawings, they're not only contributing to it, it's like buying a raffle ticket in a way, but they're also going to get special, other special things, being a partner with you or a member of your group. And then they get an opportunity to possibly be the one that gets chosen when you do the drawings for these different events. I think it's a great way. It's a great idea.
I've always said that if I do pick somebody out of Los Angeles and I send them to the UK, no, I'm not going to pay for their car rental. I'll throw in some money for it, but I don't want to be. You can't drive on the other side of the road, for gosh sakes. I've seen people driving in LA. My God, actually, a lot of people in LA know how to drive on the other side of the road, because I've also seen that. But it's but it's it's something, like I say, I'd like to give stuff back. I also like to travel to these locations myself, and heck, I don't want to really just give the trips away, because you'd get taxed wonky on them if you ended up winning a trip. So it's not really winning. I'm just gonna have people come along with me and see these castles in the UK, or the battlefields of Gettysburg, or the UFO conference outside of Sydney, Australia, and we get to bounce around to them. Nice. And we were talking off air about the International Bigfoot Festival in Kennewick, Washington at the end of August and first part of September. So, bounce down there, and then you can go to Burning Man after that. So,
right.
Yeah. So it's these little things, the little giving back to the people who are actually supporting us would be really, really cool. Plus, it gets me to buy more equipment and better camera systems for when I do go out and do the interviews with people. So yeah, good.
Yeah, he's taking it on the road, you guys, and that's important, to be able to have the money to do that.
So that'd be kind of fun, and at least to get and take a couple of people along with me, and they can see how it works, and interview them maybe on how their experience was the first time they were in a Gettysburg battlefield, old battlefield hospital in a barn, and getting smelling the smells and hearing the sounds and getting touched on the leg by somebody who's still laying there recovering from their injuries. Very, very interesting. Lots of places around the U.S., lots of places around Canada, the U.K. when we get up to that much. It's going to be fun. We are talking to Karen A Dahlman, and we were just talking about the Creative Visions TV that she does, her live interviews. So she's on Facebook. For us, if my videotaped interviews with people like Dr. Lynn Kitai and John D'Souza, the X-Man, you won't be able to see those unless you are a member of our Patreon. So go to our homepage and click on the Patreon link and throw in a donation, get on the list of draws. But then you'll be able to also access the video recordings of their interviews. If not, you still get the audio, just creative editing, that's all. which isn't that creative. I just copy the audio to a different file and squish it all down into something that's usable per se. Now you've been doing your video recordings. Now you will do them live where you can, and like go out and interview somebody live. But you also do them via like what's that system called that I'm using right now? Skype. Okay, so you'll Meanwhile, he has a big sign in front of me.
Yeah, we're using Skype right now.
Yeah,
guys.
That big sign says Skype. Yeah, well, that's what you're using.
That's what you're using.
Yeah. So it's kind of it. I think it's interesting that you are reaching out. This is a new way of presenting the information to other people, and it's not like we're sitting at the end of my bed in my bedroom anymore doing a radio show, trying to keep my kids out of the room and the dog from jumping on me. But it's a lot. I think it's a lot clearer when you can actually see the person you're talking to. So it's a lot of fun, and I like what you're doing with your YouTube.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoy it. It'll be 4 years that I've been on YouTube. This spring, I started with the Women of Ouija with Marla Martinson. We did a whole show on that for a couple of years, and it'll be 2 years doing Creative Visions TV, which is this new show where I interview people. Also, if anybody's interested in the Ouija board and curious and have questions or want to take it to the next level, I do a lot of live shows there where you can actually interact with the guides directly, ask your questions. I also do something that's called questions in a hat or messages from a hat, and you give me your questions. I put them in a hat, we pull them out and draw them, and then we play it back on YouTube. My partner Rodney is many of you guys follow me. Rodney's my main board partner I work with, and he's on there with me as well. We also talk about using this tool, how to get past any stumbling blocks you have. And also the most important thing I do is to dispel the silly myths and superstitions about the board that are out there. And so I just want to help people have a great experience using it. And again, if you're not using the board, I have a lot of guests on there. And I talk also about other things you can do in order to work in these realms, as we're talking about today with James. So it's a win-win. And also, just if you join me there, if you join me, subscribe to it, you'll know exactly when I'm doing my live sessions, when I've got upcoming question and answer sessions, or even just every video. We drop a video about once a week. I think it's once a week I'm doing videos. So it's something new all the time. So yeah, come out and join me there.
Oh yeah, I think I will, just to drive you crazy.
Good, please. Please do.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I want to do that, and opening it up to having live interaction with your following base that you have there it's very important, because people will. I'm really sure as we spread this kind of message out to the world, or the world that listens, we may touch somebody who actually kind of gets their little nudge on their 180-degree turn.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we could do that even just once a year for somebody, that's really, really good, and get them going off on a tangent like that. I have an interesting question, or I think it's an interesting question. For you, it's probably a crappy question, but hey, what do you think happens when we die and leave this meat sack?
Well, are you talking about the process itself, or the moment of death? Or are you talking about when you actually, exist in another dimension?
What's the process?
Well, okay, I have never had a near-death experience, so I don't know anything about that. I do know when I speak to the spirits, different beings who have transitioned, it's for most of them, and there's a few that have not had the best experience, and I did write about a couple of those in my book, The Spirits of Ouija. But for the most part, there's a simple releasing of the body, letting go, and all of a sudden being in a spirit-like body. And a lot of times that spirit body, as I'm told, will take the shape of the body that they left, but in a better condition. And over time, it could be instantaneous, it could be an hour, it could be a week. The time is so different in the other dimension. You can't base it on our timeline, that they will tend to take on a form where they felt the most comfortable when they come back and present themselves to people that are still in this dimension. So I remember when my grandmother died, and I had this first-handedly, my own example of this. When she transitioned, this is back in 89. It was a few years later that she came to me in a dream, and it was more than just a dream. It was one of those real vivid, live interactions. And she said, Karen, here I am. And it was this woman I didn't recognize because she was a little bit older when she died. And she was this beautiful, I would say around 40ish. And how I knew this because I talked to my mom and dad about this. It was my dad's mother. And I talked to him about it later. And they said, oh, that's what she looked like. And so there was this woman in this beautiful purplish flowing gown. She loved pink and purple. And she wore these cat eye glasses, which I love them. She always wears cat glasses. She had these cat eye glasses on, and she just looked so young. Her hair was longer. She looked, and I was like, Grandma, it's you? She's like, yes, this is me. And I'm learning all these really interesting things. She goes, I'm learning she just talked about the animal communication. So I'm learning to work with the animals and talk with them. And I'm also learning about radionics. And I never even heard of the word radionics. Didn't even know what that word was. This was like 1990. Yeah, it was about a year or 2 years after she died. So I've been 91 around that time. Didn't even know what that was. And she said, I'm learning about this. And then she showed me how she was doing the animal communication. Said, watch these animals. And there was animals in my dream. And she's like, look, I'm talking to them. And it just was a cool dream. And I woke up and I went, oh my God, I felt like my grandmother. I called my parents. I explained. And I go, that's what she used to look like. And I'm like, wow. And then I looked up radionics, and sure enough, radionics is when you use this energy, vibratory pattern of energy of a frequency to shift something that's sick or not in good conditions, and you can shift it through this process of frequency. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And radionics is a big thing now. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is when they go to the other side, they actually get to continue growing and learning. There could be a life review at first to say, what is it that I did right or didn't do right, what I didn't like, what I liked. And you get to really experience how you touched other people and maybe how you even hurt other people. And that takes a little bit of time. And there's always other beings there helping them do that. And then they have this transformation I was talking about. And part of that transformation that happens is because they are being honest with themselves. It's not like, and this is what they've told me time and time and time again. Every time I talk to one of them and ask these questions, they don't say there's some guy in a robe or at pearly gates judging me. The hardest thing is you have to judge yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have to look at you and how you've touched or hurt other people, and how and what you did in life, and did you live a life that you felt like you let yourself down, or did you live a life that you really did push the boundaries and do what you wanted to do and be what you want to be? And it's not so much what you did; it's how you were as a person. That's what it always boils down to. And I find when they talk from the other side too, they're learning more about the expansiveness of what life is about. When you live in this realm, we call this life, we call that death. They also tell me there's no such thing as a death, that death does not exist. That's a word we made up for a person transitioning, or it's where we think you go and you stay forever. They're saying, no, there's other levels we go to. You may choose to reincarnate. You may choose to go to another planet. You may choose to, like my grandma was doing, working with the animals. You just do all these things that you've always wanted to do, and you get to continue on. Nothing ever stops us. And so part of that process is coming back and visiting your loved ones in a dream, or coming back and making your presence known through a smell or through a touch or through a vision. They never, ever leave us. And by the way, the animals tell me the same thing too. When they transition, my cat Panzer died just last July. So it's been, like 7-8 months. And I miss him tremendously. And it was a hard process of the whole thing. I was with him when he died and had to put him down. And I was there during that. And the first thing he said to me, he says, I have helped you all these years. This is how the animals talk. I'm here to help you. I've helped you all these years. And when I needed you the most, you were there to help me. And you took that pain away. And I thank you for that. It was just, and it's touching. I can feel emotion rising up because it was so beautiful that I was struggling with, I have to put my animal down, and all my other cats I've had have all died on their own. And I had actually put him down because it was such terrible pain. And he had a terrible, what did he have? He had liver cancer. It was horrible. So we did everything I could. But when I put him down, he thanked me for that. And he still talks to me. And in fact, you guys want to watch it, you could go on my YouTube channel. I have a few videos where Panzer comes through and has messages and talks about, he has a message for everybody, from him to give to people about the animals and what their purpose is. And he does a whole series on that. And he says to me, he says, Mom, Karen, he calls me Mom, I've touched more people in my dying than I did when I was alive. And I think that's true. He's got a little fan club there, and people know Panzer, and he has a lot to say. But he talked to me a lot on the board when he was alive as well, and he's in one of my books, the Spirits of Ouija. But yeah, so the animals say the same thing too. There is a process, there is a life. You continue living. You never die. Death is an illusion. We continue on, just in another form. And science talks about that. It's matter's neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. And this is what they all tell me when they leave. Now, sometimes I have run into those spirits that are stuck, and stuck is probably not the right word. It's not like they can't move on. It's because they chose not to. They have a misinformation. Well, I've had them come to me and tell me that they're afraid of God. They're afraid they're going to be punished because they weren't nice people in life. I've had them say, I don't know where I am. I didn't want to leave. I had too much more to do in my life. And so there's those, and they can quickly turn that around once they realize that it's okay to let go. It's okay to move on. And so some of them can be angry and mad or upset or jealous or all these human emotions. And those are the ones that are in the astral level. Those are the ones that are the tricksters. Those are the ones that create these hauntings or poltergeists and all these different things. And they just can't let go. And if they have help from somebody, and I do this a lot, I do what you might call spirit releasement. It's not what I choose. It's when they come to me and ask me to help them. And then I do. And I read about that in the book as well, and share some of that information on how to do that. And it's really a beautiful thing once they are able to move forward. I've had them come back on occasion and visit me and thank me for that help, but also to talk to me about what's going on in their life, their new life now. So there is the process of still living, and it's nothing to be fearful of yet, because we haven't experienced. I haven't experienced it. I'm sure there'll be some fear at the time. I don't know. But they say even if you have that fear, even if you were killed in a car wreck or killed on the battlefield, you still have that ability to drop all that pain instantaneously. And that's the other thing. They don't feel that pain. I've had people that have also committed suicide come back and talk to me as well. And they're usually in a growing process of learning and forgiveness of themselves, and to the people they left behind, because they realize the pain they've created or caused people that are still living here to have. So it's think of it this way: it's just a new life. It's a new life on, let's say, on steroids, because it's so different. You can go and be and do and come instantaneously, and go work with the animals and go learn radionics and learn all these things that you always wanted to do. And it's just part of your evolution of your soul. You're always evolving and always growing.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's funny that you parallel what a psychic has been telling me for years on what happens. It's primarily when you were talking about the point where you have to admit to your own, like forgiving yourself or understanding things you've done wrong. There's a term that we had used, and we called it the blue room. When you go to the first part of the blue room, is all you have to basically do. The term was download the threads. We all have threads. You and I have a thread. Our listeners now have a thread to us. Now, if I, like, say, bullied you in grade school, I then would have to, part of my thread to you is I have to feel what you felt when I bullied you. If that made you bully somebody else, I have to feel that too, because that thread continues. So I have to accept all the negative, and I have to feel what all those people felt. And once I've felt everything, I've accepted it, I can move to the next part of the blue room, which is I get to download all the good ones.
Yes.
So you come out of that, and then you kind of go to, quote unquote, go to school, where you're you taught the reasons why you were there, why you died when you did, why you were born when you did, what the whole universe is all about. And you get the rules. Yeah, you're not allowed to tell anybody else this stuff. If somebody does, Karen gets a hold of you on the Ouija board. Yeah, what color?
Oh, they tell me
God's
a lot.
Eyes.
They tell me so much. You're right. They may talk.
Yeah, there's certain things that they're not supposed to say, like, God is a Volkswagen. Those are the things that we're supposed to not know, because it's basically what it is. There's the details about spirit, God, the force, the universe. Don't get into specifics. It's you'll know when you know, that kind of answer. But that said, you have more detail than what goes on, and you have more detail about the animals and your pets and other beings and things that guide us. Maybe loved ones who passed. I had a brother who was stillborn. Some psychics every so often will see a young boy with me. And it's the only one I could think of is he drops in once in a while. And he'll show up as a young boy because even though he was stillborn, he doesn't show up as a 60-year-old man where he would be 60s or something. So
yeah, exactly.
it depends what he shows
most
up.
Comfortable, and you're probably most comfortable experiencing him.
When my mother shows up, she shows up in her late 20s, early 30s when she was like hitting the dance floor and having a good time. And the psychic that I went to, freaked the hell out of me, the very first psychic who knew my mother's name was Lexa, Lexa. I was like, okay, you're for real.
Yeah, that's not a normal name, traditional. Yeah, that's
and then totally described her. So after that, everything that came out of the psychic's mouth was like, I took it hook, line, and sinker, which absolutely was amazing. But your view on death and transition. We don't need to have, a near-death experience to me isn't a near-death. It's a death. You died. And then you got the tap on the shoulder saying, what the heck are you doing here?
Yeah.
Get back
Go
in line.
Yeah.
A lot of the best psychics that I've ever spoken to, again, Marianne Morgan, will bring her up. Last I heard, and I'm going to be calling her later today, I think she's died 9 times.
Interesting.
And she knows when she's going to die again. So that's kind of irritating. She describes it as like, if you think of life as a hallway in a hotel, and you come in the exit at one end of the hallway and you leave the exit at the other end. But as you go down that hallway, there are a bunch of doors. Mm-hmm. And you have the option of leaving at certain points in your life. And you'll get a little tap on the shoulder sometimes, and it'll be, have you checked off your list of things you wanted to do? And if they have been checked off, you might go out the second door on the right. You might not have to go all the way down to the end of the hall. As we check off those things in our life, if we don't get the whole list checked off by the time we end and go to the end of the hall, guess we'll have to come back and do it again. And when we check the last 2 things off, maybe the first door on the left is where we leave. We might be the age of 5 or something, or the different views of transition, the different views of transition of animals. And now you've got me thinking, the first part of our conversation today was like trees. My gosh.
Yeah.
A tree doesn't mind being uprooted and replanted,
No.
but I'm pretty sure it's going to mind being turned into a desk. Or is it? Is that?
Well, I have asked that question. I asked also like of the buffalo being eaten and all, an animal or cow or something like that. So the tree, yes, does it want to be killed? No, but it realizes it has a purpose here too. And its purpose as a tree is to make paper. And purpose of the tree sometimes is to just be in a thick forest. So there's purposes here, and they're okay having those purposes and serving it. The buffalo, when I asked about the buffalo, and they said, your native people respect us, and we would gladly lay our bodies down for them. They use all parts of us, and we are glad to be a part of that and help them and nourish them and help them survive. But if it's just meaningless killing, when we had the Great Buffalo Massacre in the United States to get rid of a lot of the Native Americans population, when that happened, that was a very sad day for buffalo. A very sad day for the Native Americans. They relied on those animals, but they didn't kill them unnecessarily. It wasn't the fact they don't want to be eaten. They're okay. And the buffalo also said, they gave us an analogy. They said, and know that we would gladly lay down for your native people. And know this, the grass gladly lays down for us to nourish our bodies. So they understand the cycle of life. They understand that the grass feeds them. The grass is willing to give themselves to them, as trees are willing to give themselves to us to build our homes and things of that nature as well. There's a purpose for everything, and it just depends where you are, in your purpose, in the hierarchy of living in life.
What do you think about the vegan philosophy? Is like you only eat the plants. You don't eat anything that's animal.
Well, when I started sharing this with people said, well, what do I eat now? I can't eat anything. I go, no, you can. They gladly give of themselves. And even the animals that we eat. And I'm a vegetarian, just to everybody know that. I'm not a vegan, although at times I do practice that. I do eat fish still, but that's it. I may give up fish myself because I do talk to fish as well. And it's sad to me sometimes. But it's not that they don't want us to eat them. It's that if it's done humanely, that's a whole nother story. And that's part of their purpose. of being born here. Now, people are going to hate me saying that. And listen, I don't like eating animals, and I haven't eaten animals, since I was 22. So I've been doing this a very long time, and it's my path I'm on, and I just really love the animals. But I do know people. A lot of my friends eat meat, and I don't hold that against them because I feel like we're all in our own process of evolution and all in our own way of learning what's right for our bodies in this life. And who am I to judge that? And also the animals. I don't like seeing the animals that are treated horrifically in these farms, the cows, all of our cattle, or the population we feed off of pigs and all. That makes me sad. But I'm not going to judge somebody for that. Everybody has their own path that they have to live. What I would like to see changed is how we can humanely treat these animals. And maybe, for example, if you're going to eat eggs, maybe, get the eggs from the chickens that are free range. They're actually literally outdoors. Mm-hmm. I know my brother, one of my brothers who lives in Alaska, his family, they have their own chickens, and they don't eat them, but they get the eggs. The chickens run around outdoors all day, and they made them a coop, and they run back in at night, and they close it up so they're safe. And they have heating lamps. It's a nice little house he built for the chickens, but they eat their eggs, and that's how they do it. But it's done humanely. These animals are not stuck in a cage to produce eggs.
What do they do after the 3 years when they don't lay anymore?
Well, they donate them to people that will take them, families that will take them and use them as pets.
Okay, so, good.
Yeah, I know. So, there's a whole thing there. And so I try not to judge anybody on that path they're on, even if they're eating meat. And so I really encourage people not to do that, but find out what's right for yourself and go down that path. And in the end, as James and I are talking, it's all about your own judgment to yourself. Personally, when I'm looking at myself, I don't want to think that I've hurt any animals. That's where I'm at with it. So animals mean the world to me. And I think they're here to teach us. But the buffalo, some of these animals and cows, if they were treated better, they're okay with that. But, putting them in these little stalls and little calves that can't even stand up so you can have the veal, it's just not nice. It's just not right.
Yeah.
So
in your opinion, and I want your opinion based on basically how you are feeling right now and how possibly you are being guided to answer the question. There are various cultures around the world that basically, given an opportunity, would devastate an ecosystem.
Oh, I know.
Would eat everything that moves within their boundaries. Are they? How are they? What would be the most politically correct way of asking this? These countries, or the people in these countries, it's a cultural. We'll call it a cultural way of existence. And within that culture, is that a kind of I don't want to say prehistoric, but is that a culture that eventually will change and grow into a culture of understanding? Because they're very superstitious cultures, but they will, as I say, devastate an ecosystem just because if I don't eat it, you will. And I need it for me, or my family should have this, not yours. So everything is like reaching out and grabbing. And are those cultures ever going to tune in?
Well, we tend to look at as a group, and maybe that's not always the right way to do it. Yet the group is what feeds the personal experience and teaches the person to have that kind of experience that may be devastating when we look at it. It's hard to take things out of context. That's what we have to not do. We have to quit taking things out of context. So you have a culture that's doing this, and we look at it from our eyes like, oh, you're killing the rainforest, or you're taking these trees, or you're doing this or that. And I may not agree with it, and I don't agree with it on that level if they're killing the rainforest. But I can also see their perspective of this is all they know. This is how they've lived. This is what their society and culture have taught them. And I think when we get so judgmental, sitting on our little glass in our glass tower, or on our side of the world in our comfy home, but not thinking like, what is their life really like? And not that we have to support it, and not that we have to go, it's right or wrong, or even judge it. It's to say, it's like hoping that there's some ability for them to wake up from the group and to begin to seeing that maybe this path is not the best that they're going down, and maybe is hurting a lot of other beings or animals or plants or life, or killing the earth, or all these things. I mean, we're doing it. It's every country is doing it. Every culture, every country is doing this on some level. And it is a matter of us waking up. And I believe we go back to, like you're talking about 2012, and I was talking about the harmonic conversion in 1987. These are all ways for us to wake up, where we begin to look at ourselves and say, oh, I'm not going to follow that group anymore. I don't want to be a part of that group. Or this, I feel like I'm under hypnosis. I've thought this is the way things should be. But I find that when we take our personal empowerment back by saying, no, I don't agree with that. Even if I'm in that culture that's doing these things, like, let's say, just trashing the rainforest, that when I start to take my personal power back, I start to see things through my own eyes and not through the group think, the hive mind. Yeah. And then that's when awakening really happens. So for me to judge them is probably not right, because it's out of context. But for me not to participate, I won't do that. And for me to maybe say there's another way to go about it, I would probably say that too. Good. So we have to look at it from their shoes a little bit, and then also, within their context, I think, before we judge too many people.
I know it's tough. It's awkward. A friend of mine was a policeman here in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he was in a big park called Stanley Park. It's connected to Vancouver. It's huge area, lots of wildlife, and in the middle of the night, he pulled over a van with a couple of guys in it from another culture, and they had a big fishing net, and they caught a couple of geese in the middle of the night.
Oh.
and killed them. And my buddy says, "What are you doing with those?" And their answer was, "You people let the food walk around." So they were just used to, if from their country, if they saw a goose, they were going to take it before someone else did.
Yep.
So that's what they did.
So it's almost like poachers in a way.
It is, but it's a cultural thing. It's like, you could have gone to the store and bought one. Well, no, it's free because you just let them walk around here.
So are there rules though? Are there laws? See, we have to look at this.
Yeah. There are laws against that. That's why they did it in the middle of the night.
So then they knew they were guilty and wrong. So this is a different story. Now, this is these are people that actually knew it was wrong. They did it at night. There are laws, and guess what? There's consequences. And so that's something we need to look at too. So if there are rules in place, and people say, well, we don't practice that, but they knew they were doing something wrong, they were going against the law. There's laws in place to keep people in check. So yeah, those laws need to be
enforced.
Practiced.
Yeah, and
they should be punished if whatever that law requires.
And they were, but comes down to it was a cultural decision. They look at it differently than.
Was it really though? Then why do they do it at night? They were hiding something.
Oh, they were, because it's cultural for them to take the food,
right?
But they did it at night because they knew they'd get in trouble for it.
There you go. So
it's free food.
But you got to remember, they're also living within a larger context of a larger culture, and they need to live within that culture too.
Yeah, that's the hard one.
It is a hard one, but a lot of people pull out that card and use that. And yes, it might be true, but it also is an excuse when you're living within a larger society that in order for all of us to get along, we have to follow these certain laws. Now, laws are meant to be changed, and if that law's not changed yet, then they really need to follow it. And they knew they were doing something wrong. So to pull that out, seems
here's
mischievous.
Something, based on and talking about living with the earth and not off of the earth, like we seem to be doing. About 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, one of the episodes I used to have on my show was called The Shift. And the shift we said was coming. And the first parts of the shift were minor weather change, followed by political upheaval to where politicians around the world were going to almost split their countries in half and this was going to be coming and basically taking their individual countries almost to the point like they were on the edge of a razor where they could fall either way. And it was going to become more, we're going to drill for more oil, we're going to frack everywhere, we are going to, more open mining and things. And back then, 3 or 4 years ago, was like, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. But it has happened. But the reason it's there is the Earth itself, Gaia herself, is getting to the point where we projected that Gaia was saying, look, live off with me, not off of me, or things will happen. So the political thing has changed in Europe and North America and Australia, and it's going to the increased weather change. The storms are going to increase. One of the gifts we were given, believe it or not, was the devastation of what's that place? I had a brain fart. Puerto Rico. And
yes.
you get an example of what would happen if the grid goes down. Like when you cannot access your bank, you cannot use a credit card, a debit card. You have no access to someplace that will give you money. Therefore, you have no access to food, water, fuel, anything like that. And all those people who worked at those locations that sold food, water, and fuel are at home with their families because they need to be. So what are you going to have to do? I'm going to have to trade. I'm going to bake bread and trade it for your apples or your chickens, or we're going to have to get back into a bartering situation. So we were given that microcosm of what would happen when the grid goes down, and nobody really paid attention to it. Well, if we continue to live off the earth and continue to scar what we're living on, she's basically going to go to the next level, which is going to be a grid shutdown, which will lead to civil unrest, because we've already got the populations, kind of the haves and the have-nots, or the live with the earth against the no, I'm fine in my bunker attitudes, and they'll be if we don't start getting along and living as one, the earth herself is going to give us a good shaking. And if that all this civil unrest and possible civil war and weather, extreme weather doesn't get our attention, then the earth herself is just going to shake us into the ocean. So a good chunk of us anyway. And this is why we start talking about it. This is why there's so many people being quote unquote enlightened, because they're going to have a need to teach other people in the future. So what is your opinion on that? And have you heard anything from the other side in regards to something like that coming?
I have, and what you're saying is it's happening. We're seeing these things happen too. I also personally, this is what the guides say too. There's cycles that we're going through. It's a lot of things are cyclical in nature, and one of the things that we've talked about before is with great technological advancements comes great change. Technology is rapidly changing every minute. I mean, I'm one of the businesses I do is I also work in the telecommunications industry, and I see all these new phones that come out, and my job is working with a lot of the infrastructure that allows your mobile cell phones to work, and we can't even keep up. The infrastructure is way behind the advancement of the phones. So we have such great things that are coming out, and with that comes so much change. I mean, here we are, you and I are having this conversation. You're in Canada, I'm down in Southern California. Instantaneously, we're sending files back and forth to each other. And that's the beauty of having these shows. You can talk to somebody in Australia and you think they're in the same room. With all the things that are happening in the world that we're seeing, it's because of how much we've changed really in the last just 100 years, how technology's changes so much, and how we can now really see what's going on, like you said, in Australia, when you're sitting over here in North America, and we get that instantaneous feedback, and that in itself puts it right in our face even more so. So there's always been the unrest. There's always been a lot of issues in the world. We just didn't have the ability to see it instantaneously, or to experience it, or to really know those people. I mean, we used to get letters that took months, or they have to go across the boat, and then they get on, get in a stagecoach with people that ran them, or rode horses. I mean, it took forever to get the news, and so now we have it right away. So it actually seems like things are worse. If you think back to the Dark Ages, and there's a reason why they're called the Dark Age or Middle Ages in Europe, everyone was feuding and killing each other, and it was the kings and queens against the poor people, the slaves, the serfs, all that. There was always this unrest going on, and Mother Earth Gaia does not like it, but Mother Earth Gaia is really here to support us. She's alive and breathing, and yes, she can make things happen, but so can we. Our technology has taken us to levels where we can manipulate the weather, we can manipulate storms. HARP is out in the open. There's technology we have that takes us off planet into other solar systems. There's the secret space program, if people buy into that. There's so many things going on that we're not aware of that are causing a lot of the unrest. And yes, and I think also there's a lot of civil unrest in the different countries, in the different nations. And some of it is created by people themselves they want divisiveness. You're seeing this in a lot of countries happening right now. We see it in the United States. And so what I try to do, and what the guide suggests too, is to wake up to your personal empowerment. Never give yourself away to these groups that we talked about earlier. Be a part of a group, but once you feel like there's a lot of slogans and banners that you're being asked to follow or go along with it, and you know it doesn't feel right, don't do that. If it feels right, do it. But never give up your freedom. And with that, when things do change and things get harder, you'll be able to step up and know what to do, and you won't be relying on somebody to do it for you. But you'll know if you need to go barter, as you mentioned, the apples versus the bread, or you'll know how you're going to now communicate with somebody if the grid goes down. By the way, your cell phones aren't going to work, guys. Our cell phones are land based. They're not based on satellites. They're all land based. When the power goes down, the cell towers stop working too. Mm-hmm. So they have battery backup for a certain amount of time. So yeah, you won't even have your phones. You won't have your internet. None of that stuff. It'll all go down. But what you can do for yourself is empower yourself now to know what it is you're following, know what it is you're thinking about, know what it is that's happening in your edge of the world, in your nation. Really waken yourself to the policies and what's being said and who's saying what, and where the money is. Follow the paper trail, the money trail. It always tells you who's backing what and who's doing what, and wake yourself up to these things. And knowledge is really your best power. Knowledge of all these things, how you can survive, knowledge of how you can be independent, knowledge of how you can also interact with people, knowledge of people you can trust in case something happens. And I don't want this to be doom and gloom and scare, because if you think about it, in our history, at the end of every century, in this last century, it was Y2K, if you recall, all the computers are going to go down. We always think it's the end of times. And yes, times do get tough because there are cycles, and there's cycles with people too. But also, there's beautiful things that are happening too. And there is something called the law of critical mass, which is like the 100th monkey syndrome. It's the idea that when enough people work together in unison through thought forms, through beliefs, through intentions, here we are back full circle back to intentions, that they can create astonishing things to happen. They can also create negative things to happen. So become aware what's going on in the world. Really pay attention to, what you're reading, hearing, seeing, the news, all these different things, and filter it. Filter it through a person that's empowered, that can do something. Filter it through yourself. And then look at, what is it I can do right now in my own power? What can I do? And begin working with people. Have group meditations. Put the thought out there yourself. What can you do to, as I tell people, always sweep your own front porch or your back porch. Don't worry about sweeping in the street or sweeping your neighbor's porch. What can you do yourself to become enlightened and empowered and strong within you, and have a faith and a belief in the earth again and in your fellow humanity? And know this too, as we were talking about this earlier, with everybody waking up, there are beings out there, these loving beings that are here to help us, and they are just right in the wings waiting. And many people are having more experiences of them, and some of them could be extraterrestrial, some are interdimensional, but they're here to help humanity. They don't want this planet to go down. They don't want to see it be trashed. They don't want to see us totally annihilating each other and throwing on some more nukes and things. They don't want to see that. They're here to step in, and they're stepping in with certain people, certain leaders. They're coming in more and more, and we just have to have faith in that. And again, the more you can do to wake yourself up to these other dimensions and have these helpers help you, I think you'll find that it's a lot easier to get through the day when you hear of such atrocious and horrible, heinous things going on around the world.
Excellent. Good call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's what I feel.
A little bit passionate, right? About that. That's
I'm
good.
slightly passionate.
And remember, for those of you who drink coffee, 60% of all of the 124 known species are the edge of extinction. So it may hit home. If it's not hitting home yet, the Earth is going to have to say, like, how am I going to get your attention? Oh yeah, kill off all the coffee. That'll get you. Anyway, Karen, I'm hearing music in the background, which means it's time for me to let you get back to work. And I will drift off. And I want to thank you, Karen A Dahlman, for dropping by the Oracles of James Tyson today. And remember, if you want to drop in and say hi to Karen, you can check her out on her website, Creative Visions Publications, with Karen A Dahlman. It is a very, very nice little website. There's her contact information on it there if you want. And again, Creative Visions TV, YouTube, just Google Karen A Dahlman, and it'll take you to all sorts of links. But if you want to talk to her, you can email her at creativevisionspublications.com. Go to the contact. Also look at the books that she has out right now and pay close attention to young Karen releasing a new one in the future here. You have a possible date for that coming out?
No, we haven't. No, I would like it to be by the end of this year, but we haven't quite determined if it's going to be able to be done. But the writing of it will be completed here it'll be by the end of summer. I have a deadline. So end of summer, beginning of fall, the writing will be completed. And at the point with publishing, getting it out might take a little bit longer. But the goal is sooner. I would like to get it out by the end of this year. I don't know if that's going to happen though. Go to my, like you said, go to my website, go to my YouTube. I'm dropping a lot of nuggets from the book there, but there's going to be so much more new information. It's been an absolute delight being on your show. Thank you for having me, James. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you.
Oh, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Karen A Dahlman, everybody. Thanks again, and we will probably get a hold of you soon on a video interview.
This is our last goodbye. Young hearts will stop. Torn souls set free. All that we have is now. If this is what you want, then come to me.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey! Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing and they go, what are those voices? Look up for the mountain. Because somebody hide, somebody better hide. On through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail.